What could be the reason that America, despite being the world's largest oil producer, cannot use its own oil, even if it wants to? It is much like a farmer growing crops on his own land. When he goes to use those crops, he has to fold his hands in front of someone else. In the world we actually live in, what is seen in front and the reality behind are always different. Similarly, millions of containers go to America from China every year. But why does America throw them in the garbage heap? And how does Iran smuggle Boeing 777 aircraft from the middle of all this in front of the whole world? Let's find out all this in today's episode. Millions of ships sail on the seas of the world, and 90% of our civilization's economy survives on the shoulders of those ships. At any given moment, thousands of container ships are crossing the vast ocean, and on each ship there are thousands of iron boxes. The clothes you wear, the mobile phones you carry, have been inside these boxes at some point. Yes, from a distance, it seems that goods will come in containers. Empty containers will return. Everything is as if according to plan. But in reality, there is such an inconsistency hidden in this flow that your eyes will pop out when you hear it. Anyway, China has become the factory of the entire world in the last few decades. Their huge exports and limited imports have created a huge trade empire. So the real problem begins when these containers reach the ports of Europe or America. The business profits of the entire European country are very small compared to China. And in the case of America, the picture is even different. The world's largest consumer, this country imports a lot, but exports very little. As a result, 40% of the containers that come from China return with goods. But where does the remaining 60% go? It's not that all the containers return empty, because sending empty containers means additional costs. Each empty box costs about $3,000 to send back to China, and it also takes up valuable space on the ship. Full container could have generated millions of dollars in revenue. Even China can make new containers in its own country for just $2,000, so they don't feel the need to send old boxes back. The result is that many new containers are made every year, but they lie rusting in the ports and around the cities of the old country. Some buy them and build cheap warehouses and small houses. Others melt them down and extract steel from them. A large part of them remains unused. These rusting mountains of iron are a silent signature of the imbalance in world trade. On the other end of this global trade lies the secret of American oil. The country today produces the most oil in the world, but they cannot fully use their own oil. The first reason is the nature of the oil. The oil that is extracted from American soil is light and thin, which is called light crude. But most of the country's refineries are built to process heavy and dense oil. Once upon a time, America imported heavy oil from Mexico and Venezuela. Accordingly, the equipment was also built there. However, now, to replace that equipment and make it suitable for processing light oil, an investment of more than $200 billion is required, which is not possible in a very short time. So they sell light oil abroad at high prices and import heavy oil from abroad at low prices. The second reason is the infrastructure crisis. They do not have sufficient pipelines from where oil is discovered and extracted to the refineries. For example, Texas has an oil sea, but they do not have sufficient pipelines to reach the refineries on the East Coast. States like California also do not have their own pipeline infrastructure, so they depend on imports for about 70% of their fuel. As a result, even if the country has oil under its soil, it cannot reach the right place. However, if we now turn our eyes to the politics of sanctions and blockades, we will see another dramatic story. Iran has been under strict sanctions imposed by the United States for many years. It cannot buy or sell anything from America or its allies. Yet, a private airline called Great Air in Iran uses many American Boeing and European Airbus aircraft. But how is this possible? Every 2024 to 25 story is like a thriller. 5 Boeing 777s suddenly come into the hands of Iran. Originally, these aircraft belonged to Singapore Airlines. They had been abandoned in the Australian desert for a long time. Iran could not buy them directly because the sanctions were too severe. So So first, an American-based company bought them. Later on the documents, they were shown as being sold to two fake companies in Madagascar and Cambodia. In fact, these companies had no real existence. They were all just names to avoid sanctions. Then when these planes came under the name of Madagascar, they went out of the control of the US authorities. Then the planes went for maintenance. The pilots filed for Kenya on the pretext that they were flying. But as soon as they entered Afghan airspace, they turned off their transponders and disappeared from radar. Then they changed their destination and arrived at various airports in Iran. And by the time other countries in the world realized this, they had merged with Iran's great air fleet. According to the law, the United States also had nothing to do, because Iran's name was not on these transaction documents. Everything was done through a third party. These incidents remind us how uncertain the global economy really is. The impact of decisions made far away affects our lives every day. So in the future, when you hear someone talk about rising oil prices or shortages of goods, remember that behind that reality lies a complex story of shipping law and diplomacy.